What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video here on Rangers Central. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been tough to honestly talk about this team because it's really not much, but today we're back and doing a video that is annual, so at the very least I have something here as we're in the middle of August, or more towards the end. But regardless, doing an annual video, and if you're new, welcome. We always do this where I do a recap of the offseason, if you will, as well as give my lineup projections, as well as some other predictions along the way as well. So kind of a mini season preview while also recapping the offseason, a little bit of both in there. But of course, as we're inching closer, as training camp is very close and all that stuff, we will be, of course, talking heavily about the Rangers here. So if you are new, be sure to subscribe. Leave a like, though, on the video if you enjoy it. Subscribe, like I mentioned. Turn on your notifications so you know I upload or go live on the channel. And yeah, an offseason that I thought maybe had some hope, especially with the early rumors. Thanks, Larry Brooks, though, for ruining the Jacob Trouba trade, which really could have made things very interesting for the Rangers and could have potentially set up for a huge shakeup this offseason for the Rangers. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and what's done is done. All we can do is look forward and look at what's ahead of potentially, with this upcoming season with the Rangers and see if things will be different, because that's all hope has been for quite a bit now with this team, and that's all we could do at this point. I'm done being mad. I'm done being fed up about it. It is what it is. What's done is done. And yeah, let's just jump into it and talk about it. First, we're going to start off with the additions and subtractions with the roster. On the addition side, looking pretty empty, but we'll talk about it as we'll start off with the first guy that the Rangers acquired, which I'm still trying to, I don't know what is making me scratch my head the most still as we're sitting here on August 25th. I'm scratching my head still at this deal. I don't know if it's the fact that he was the second free agent off the board. I don't know if it's the 3 years. I don't know if it's the $1 million. I quite frankly don't know what it is that I'm scratching my head at most, but they signed Sam Carrick to a 3-year deal worth $1 million, a guy that the Anaheim Ducks did not want to retain, which says a lot about who the player is. But regardless, a guy that drops the mitts a lot, that's really the best part of his game. And when you're saying that, it's really a lot of emptiness there. He's a guy that could kill penalties, though not effective at it. He could kill penalties, and maybe he comes in here and does a better job, because we do have to remember, as I was reminded on the daily when Alex Wenberg came in, he's a guy that was not really the best on the penalty kill, but came in here and ended up doing a very fine job, surprisingly. So maybe Sam Carrick falls in that same category where he's in a better situation, he's with better players, maybe he's better on the penalty kill than, he was in Anaheim. Just being with a better group of guys, also having Igor Shesterkin in goal does help. So maybe that ends up being the scenario with a guy like Sam Carrick. Who the hell knows? Hopefully, though, he ends up being good, and it ends up being the Alex Wenberg situation of that. He's a guy that's going to play the 4C, and this is where my biggest gripe is, which I'll get into right off the rip here with the addition side of things, and how I'm still not thrilled that they did not add any insurance for Filipino, because to me, it boggles my mind that a kid that has so many concussion issues at age 24, 25, rolling into the season with potentially him being online for his 5th concussion, like, it is very likely that he gets injured. And as much as it sucks to say, and I love Filipino, it's the harsh reality of it. I don't feel comfortable with Sam Carrick and Johnny Brodzinski being the depth there as the 3C, but this is the hand that we're dealt with, barring, a surprise in the farm system of somebody, which it's really lackluster there with the center depth. So I'm not really, holding out hope there, but Sam Carrick is the guy they signed as center depth, and it just is what it is. And we'll move on, though. As free agency went along and more right-wing ones were going off the board, or right-wingers in general, I'm like, okay, cool. The Rangers are just not going to land a right-winger, and it sucks. But they ended up doing it through the trade market as they landed Riley Smith through a trade. If you want the breakdown of the trade, you could go check out that video, of course, where they acquired him for like a 2nd-round pick, and there was some other pick in there, all that other stuff. So Riley Smith comes in, and he's presumably going to be the right wing one this year, or potentially, middle 6 right wing option, barring, a huge breakout from Kaka, right? Which we've been saying for years, but, who knows at this point what his role is going to end up being if Kreider's and Banachad are split up finally, which I don't think is going to happen. So he will probably start next to those two going into the regular season, or at least, get looks in preseason. If it does not work out, then hopefully there is finally a switch up there, which again, who knows if that ends up being the case. I like the acquisition, though. I really think it's a fine ad there. I I'm not holding out as much hope as some Ranger fans are with thinking that he's going to come in and be the saving grace to go next to Kreider and Zibanejad, because at the end of the day, it's been a revolving door there for a reason. So I'm not, holding out hope that he's going to be the savior, but I do think it is definitely it's definitely a warm welcome over what they've had for the past few years, whether it is, putting all these other guys up there like, Jack Roslovic, who they acquired last year, trying out Capo Caco, Blake Wheeler, which was just a vomit-worthy ad. So I do think it's a lot better than those guys. So there is positives to it, and it's a guy that is going to put up probably, north of 40 points, at least north of 30. You could at least bank on him to do that. I think a guy that's realistically going to be in the 40-point, 45-point range. So I'm very happy about the ad there. I think they did pay a little bit too much to get him, considering the fact that Pittsburgh did not want him. But at the end of the day, you got to give to get, and there's really nothing on the free agent market, so it kind of is what it is with Riley Smith. But we'll move on to the next, or the last two ads here, which are more just depth options, as Bo Grohl got a 1-year, $75K deal. I do think I just messed up the Casey Fitzgerald deal now that I am reading it, because that was a 2-year deal. But regardless, with Bo Grohl, I actually like this ad. I like the idea of taking a flyer on a younger guy, a little bit older. He's a little more mature, 24 years old, so it's not like he's really got room to be anything more. To me, I view him as just a Julian Gauthier light, where he's going to get into the lineup for a couple games. He's a younger guy. Maybe there's some potential there. I'm not them saying the players are comparable, because I'm going to be honest with you, I really don't have that much of a background knowledge on Bo Grohl. I know he's got some size to him, and that's really about it. And he was a first-round pick, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. So okay, or no, he was a second-round pick. I apologize as I pull up the information there. But yeah, I like the idea of, taking a flyer on a guy that maybe has something to him. Maybe you get a diamond in the rough with a fourth-line type guy there, a third-line type guy. Why not for a cheap price? So that was honestly, that was like one of my favorite ads of the offseason, even though there was few ads in general. It was one of my favorites because of the fact that it's like, all right, 24-year-old kid, why not see what there is there? And then the last signing is Casey Fitzgerald. Like I mentioned, it is a 2-year deal, not a 1-year deal, at $775K. And initially, I thought he was going to be the 7th defenseman until they extended Chad Ruedel, so that made me happy. And just depth, a body to bring in for the D squad, and I'm fine with it. As long as he's not the 7th defenseman, because then we're going to have some serious problems. I'm completely content with this signing. He's a guy that could play in the NHL. You prefer for him not to, but he's a guy that could do it. It kind of is what it is with him. I don't even view him as the 8th defenseman on the roster, or even the 9th. I feel like there's guys ahead of him still, like Connor Mackey and, Ben Harper, I would view still as ahead of Casey Fitzgerald. But if you want to get a guy that doesn't have as much size to him, but, could potentially fill in for Zach Jones, if you will, I think that's kind of how they view that situation, where if they want to get more of a little bit more of a smaller defenseman that could put up some points, he's the go-to guy. But I don't think they view him as really that high on the depth chart. So it kind of is what it is with Casey Fitzgerald. Now we move on to the subtraction side of things. Erik Gustafsson, he was here on a 1-year deal, and I love the idea of letting him walk. That's kind of what the idea was initially, probably with Gustafsson, where you'd cash in on your value with him. He's here for 1 year. If things don't work out with Zach Jones, and we don't see a progression there, which we definitely did with Zach Jones this year, then you then you bring back Erik Gustafsson, I should say, if Jones didn't take a step forward. But thankfully, that ended up being the case with Zach Jones. So Erik Gustafsson, they cashed in on the fact that they got a good year out of him, and now he goes to Detroit, makes his money there. Good for Erik Gustafsson. He was a fine defenseman. Definitely better in the first half than down the stretch. I still liked Erik Gustafsson for what he was. So, again, a fine 1-year type guy. Jack Roslovic, smell you later. I really don't care that he's gone. I'm actually happy about it, to be honest with you. He was really just terrible, and he was like the 10th right winger that the Rangers looked at the deadline, and there's a reason why, because he's really not that good, and he could go play for Carolina. I hope the Rangers just absolutely annihilate him, but knowing the Rangers' luck, he's going to turn into Wayne Gretzky when the Rangers play Carolina, so it kind of is what it is there with Roslovic, but he was not a good at it all. Alex Wenberg, they overpaid for him, but he was at least, a little bit more fine outside of the fact that, my God, was it annoying watching him miss tap-ins. It's fine though, right? We're accustomed to it with Ryan Strome. He goes to San Jose, so good for him. He got like $5 million there, so yeah, no thanks. On the Rangers side of things with giving him that sort of deal, he was always going to be a rental. I'm really not surprised by that, especially with the fact that the Rangers had Filipino coming back healthy. It was always going to be a 1 year, one and done type thing with Alex Wenberg. So it is what it is. Now we move on to Barclay Goodrow, which was the biggest surprise of the offseason in terms of a move. I really thought at this rate they were going to just ride out the contract, maybe buy him out in the last year when it's a little more, palatable to eat some of that. But they end up putting him on waivers, and Mike Grier does the Rangers a solid, and they claim him. So Barclay Goodrow goes to San Jose, back to where he was at one point. So good for him, sort of, because he's not happy about it. There was, of course, a little bit of sourness, as we've heard from reports, with the breakup there of those guys, and the team is not happy about it. And to that I say, I don't care. If accountability hurts the team, then you got way bigger issues. So Barclay Goodrow, he's gone. Good to get out of that contract. They really needed to, because it's too much to be paying a fourth line center. It really is. And a guy that isn't even playing well as a third line center when he does fill in. So again, with Barclay Goodrow, fine with that. Blake Wheeler, he was cooked. He goes to Boston. See you later. I really don't have anything other than to say, enjoy being back where you started your career. Good for him. Gets a PTO there. We'll see if he makes the Boston roster. If he does, I'd be surprised if he doesn't. Good for him. Good for him. I really don't have much to say. I don't hate Blake Wheeler, the person. It just was not a good situation for him to be thrown in. And then the last two are a little bit of smaller guys. Matt Hollowell, who I really actually liked last year in preseason and training camp, he goes to Pittsburgh. Good for him. And then Nick Broyard goes to the Seattle Kraken on a AHL deal. Again, good for him. Stays afloat in the NHL, getting a contract. So good for those guys. Really don't have anything to say there. And now we move on to the projected lines, the projected lineups, the forward group. So what I think the forward group will look like as of today, if we're sitting here, barring things changing, because there are scratches, there are fringe NHL guys. If you were to ask me right now who or what I think the line combinations would be, this is what I came up with, and this is what I got. Normally, I like to throw my line combinations in of what I would do, but I figured it's kind of pointless because my lines are very similar, barring, the fourth line where I would change some things, which I'll talk about. But the forward group, Kreider, Zibanejad, Smith, which I alluded to earlier, I think that's no doubt going to be the first line, or the 1B, 1A line, whatever you want to call it, to the second line. I think they're going to try Riley Smith there, and it is what it is. I'm kind of done, holding out hope for, this being the solution, because it's at some point it's just on Kreider and Zibanejad, and I think that at some point this year they have to be split up, barring, again, a huge surprise where maybe Riley Smith is the guy. Maybe I should hold out optimism there, but I'm really not, considering there's been like 20 right wingers, different wingers next to Kreider and Zibanejad since Zuccarello's departure, so I'm really, again, not holding out that much hope there. So Riley Smith, though, I think he slots there. Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere, why touch that line if it worked? So I think that's fine. Leave that line alone. They were one of the better 5v5 lines in all of hockey. They were one of the best lines in all of hockey in general. Why change things? And the only reason you should change things is if that, top line isn't working and it really sucks. But again, with this line, you get a lot of scoring. They don't play defense well, but you get the scoring, so you take the trade-off. But who knows how it's going to be, because is Panarin going to put up as many points as he did this past season? I'm not entirely confident in it. But to counter that, Lafreniere, I do think he takes a step forward. But I do think more of that production offensively comes on the power play more than anything, which we'll get to later on. But yeah, of course, with Lafreniere, there is room for improvement there. So with that second line, that's the most confident line I feel with going into next season, which was still a surprise that it worked, considering how horrendous they looked in preseason. But they ended up being fine and ended up being one of the best lines in hockey. So happy about it. Keep it rolling. Then we move on to the third line. Cooley, Hedl, Kakko, a little bit of an interesting line. Again, I don't love the fact that if Philip Hedl goes down, you're looking at Johnny Brodzinski being thrusted into a 3C role, and it's once again a situation where it's up, kick the problem down to the deadline and, give away more assets, which I really still hate that mentality. But it's kind of the situation we're in right now. Will Cooley, I think he takes a step forward in development this year, which will be very nice and a breath of fresh air there. There is a chance he does play the fourth line if, one of the guys who I have on the fringe makes the opening night roster, one or two of them, who I think could potentially win out a roster spot. But for right now, I have Will Cooley there and then Kakko. It kind of is what it is. We're in year 6. This is just who he is. This is what his role is. A third liner. I was really hoping they'd cut ties with him at this point, but it didn't end up being the case, and it is what it is. I'm not holding out hope for him taking that much of a step forward. If he does, I am the last guy complaining, like with Lafreniere last year, how I felt, a little unconfident and unsure going into things with him, and I didn't really love a lot about him. He ended up being a nice surprise. Do I think the same happens with Kakko? I'm not sure, and all I can do is hope that it does happen, because at the end of the day, I want what's best for the front, the crest on the front versus the name on the back. But I do also, of course, don't have any ill will with Kakko himself. So if he does strive, happy for him, and if he does strive, I'm happy, because it means the team is going to be in a better spot. But am I holding out hope? Quite frankly, not that much. And then the fourth line, which I'm really not a fan of, Brodzinski, Carrick, Vesey. I would much rather Edstrom get in the lineup, but if we know one thing about the Rangers, it's that they love their veterans, and I quite frankly expect them to play those two, Brodzinski and Carrick, over Edstrom and Rempe, or even some of these other guys who could win roster spots. That's what I fully expect, but who knows? Last year, I said no doubt Will Cooley was not going to make the roster, and I thought that he was on the fringe, I should say. But again, he ended up winning a roster spot, so maybe there is someone there that ends up winning a roster spot, and we're all happy because Johnny Brodzinski and Sam Carrick aren't getting as many minutes. But if you're asking me here on August 25th, I quite frankly don't feel that's going to be the case. And then we get to the D pairs, Lindgren, Fox. I do have Miller, Schneider. It could be Miller, Trouba. We'll see. And then I have Jones, Trouba, because I just prefer that, and I'm trying to manifest something good here with that. So, yeah, we'll see. Down the stretch in the playoffs, they have those two together, Miller and Schneider, that is. So maybe there's hope that it ends up being the case. I'd really love to just let them ride it out. I wouldn't also be opposed if they split up Miller or Lindgren, Fox, that is, and putting Miller on the first pair. Do I think that's going to happen? No. But remains to be seen. And then the goalies, Arsha, Sturkin, and Quick. That's not even a debate, not even a question. It is what it is there. Then we look at the scratches. Chad Ruedel, 7th defenseman. Very happy about that. Edstrom and Rempe scratches, which I know a lot of people probably want Rempe in the lineup, but I'm giving you what I think is more realistic, and we'll see what happens with Rempe. He's been working really hard this offseason, so maybe there's a chance he ends up surprising us and having, a lot more skill there to bring to the lineup. A little, or I should say a little bit more, because we know Rempe's not going to give the most skill. But he's been working with Kreider this offseason. He's been, working on fights this offseason too, so maybe he ends up slotting into the last roster spot there on the fourth line, which, there is some up in the air with Brodzinski's spot there, I would say. So maybe he ends up slotting in. And then you have the fringe guys. I do think Bo Grohl ends up being on the outside looking in, given the fact that I do think Edstrom and Rempe are still ahead of him on the depth chart. Casey Fitzgerald, who I mentioned before. Brett Berard and Brennan Hoffman, those are the two that I was alluding to before that I do think could potentially win roster spots. And if both of them win it, oh, do you have a really good problem on your hands? And at that point, I do think, because there is still speculation from insiders that potentially Kakko is on the move, I think personally the only way that happens is if Othman and Berard win roster spots, because at that point, you cash in on whatever you get with Kakko, you clear up cap space, then that's best case scenario because you get extra ammo at the deadline to utilize. And on top of that, you have guys that win roster spots that could be better. And on top of that, you are accruing more cap rolling into the deadline, which allows you more wiggle room going down into the stretch there where you could potentially add a big name piece. So that would be best case scenario. Do I think that's going to happen? No, realistically, I think maybe one of these guys win a roster spot And I'm more high on Brett Berard at this juncture than Brendan Othman. I know I'm in the minority there, but that's just how I am. I think that Brett Berard has a legit shot to win a roster spot. We'll see what happens there. And if that ends up being the case, I do anticipate him slotting in on the third line, Cooley moving down to the fourth line, and then Brodzinski being pushed as a scratch, and then one of Edstrom or Rempe being the odd man out. Again, I like the competition they have there. I will say that. You still have veterans like Alex Belzile who are in the mix. Riley Nash I have listed there somewhere. So you still have those guys. Anton Bleed is also listed there, who's also, again, he's a guy that's played NHL games. So you just have him there. And then, defenseman-wise, Jake Lecision, by the way, is still there forward-wise, which Jake Lecision has 9 lives. He'll never go away. Then you get to some more of the defensemen, Ben Harper and Connor Mackey. Like I mentioned before, I think they're ahead of Casey Fitzgerald on the depth chart there. So I think there's a realistic shot they get NHL games this season. We'll see. Hopefully that doesn't end up being the case, because that means there's a good amount of injuries. So let's knock on wood there and hope that ends up not being the case. But with those two, I think they're more ahead on the depth chart, especially considering they provided a bit of spark each of the past 2 seasons in their own respective right. Matt Robertson, another guy where I don't know how much hope I'm holding on to, but I thought I'd throw his name here because there is the chance he wins the roster spot. And then you have Brandon Scanlon, who logged an NHL game last year and did not look good in that NHL game. But he's here because maybe he has a surprise camp. Who knows? And then I do have Louis Domingue and Dylan Garand, which, barring, God forbid, an injury to the goaltending, which again, knock on wood there. I do have those two. I think Domingue is the first call up unless Garand has a unbelievable camp, has an unbelievable preseason, or is on a scorching hot start in the AHL season. Or who knows, maybe he has the Igor Shesterkin AHL season where he forces his way to be called up, and then, they rotate 3 goalies, which I don't think would be the worst thing because, you talk about workload and stuff like that. I don't think it's the worst idea to workload, especially Jonathan Quick, who, listen, I loved what Jonathan Quick gave last season. I still love the player, but I don't know if we could realistically ask for him to replicate what he did last season at age 38, 39. I think you're asking for way too much lemonade to be squeezed out of that lemon there. I think realistically he's going to regress and it's going to suck, but who knows? Maybe Domingue or Garand end up being surprise candidates there and end up being guys that end up getting some games there, which, again, I wouldn't love it to be because of injuries and stuff. I'd love it to be because guys are outperforming one another. Last but not least, which this video is going way too long, projected lines for the special teams. In terms of the penalty killers, the guys that I think that could get looks, I'll quickly rattle them off. Zibanejad, Kreider, Carrick, Brodzinski, Smith, Trocheck, Vesey, Edstrom if he ends up getting into the lineup. And then you, of course, have Fox, Lindgren, Miller, Trouba, Schneider, which I don't think Jones gets a lot of penalty killing minutes. I think those are the guys you're looking at realistically killing penalties, which it's more the same, just, subtract Barclay Goodrow and add guys like Carrick and Smith in there, which I don't think is a bad thing. And then Wenberg, of course, too, is, absent from the penalty killing there from last season. And then if you look at the power play, I'm trying to manifest this. Do I think this is what the power play units are going to be? No, but Peter Laviolette also alluded to Lafreniere potentially getting power play 1, and I think please just do this. Please just balance out the power plays a bit. Kreider, get him in the net front. Panarin, Trocheck, leave them in their spot, although Panarin would be shifting over to the other side. Leave Trocheck in the bumper, Fox quarterbacking. Lafreniere gives you the one-time option in that spot. Please do it. I want to see him on power play 1. I want to see him break out. I think he could be confidently a 70, 80-point guy if you just give him the time of day on the power play. Just do it already. Power play 2, Kakko in the net front. Don't love it, but he's there. I have Riley Smith in the bumper. I think he's actually going to be fine there. And then I have Philip Hedl on the the right side there. Mika Zibanejad in his normal left spot. And then I have Zach Jones quarterbacking, which please just let that be the case. I don't want to watch Jacob Trouba power play minutes anymore. I really am just over it. I'm tired of it. So let's not do that. If it's not going to be Jones, let it be Miller, because I don't want to watch Jacob Trouba walk the blue line this year. I'm just not something I'm interested in. So yeah, that's really all I got for you guys in terms of the projected lines. And all that other stuff. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below on the line combos. Would you do something different? Let me know your thoughts still on the offseason as a whole. Are you still disappointed? Are you kind of where I am, where, you know, you're disappointed, but you're just moving past it and it kind of is what it is? Or did you like the offseason? Are you in the minority? And I honestly would ask you to scratch your head a little bit if you did like the offseason. We're impressed, but again, you be you. I'm not going to tell you how to be a fan. I'm not going to tell you, you know, how to feel. You could feel how you want to feel. But yeah, of course, there's going to be more content coming your way when it comes to, you know, training camp coming up, when it comes to predictions, all that other stuff, maybe some podcast episodes, who knows? But yeah, let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know I upload or go live, and I'll see you guys in the next one.